by insisting he accept their lies as real, by insisting he was never to his people tied, by dictating exactly what he might feel, by permitting bawdy joy but never pride. They believed a lion could be brought to heel, that a lion could from his courage be pried, that the lion himself would learn to kneel, that a lion would not care even if his line died, that the lion himself would accept such a deal. In the end, it was only to themselves they had lied.
Those whom the gods wish to destroy, they first make mad. We must be mad, literally mad, as a nation, to be permitting the annual inflow of some 50,000 dependents, who are, for the most part, the material of the future growth of the immigrant-descended population. It is like watching a nation busily engaged in heaping up its own funeral pyre. Country, in 15 or 20 years' time, the black man will have the whip hand over the white man. I can already hear the chorus of execration. How dare I say such a horrible thing? I'm filled with foreboding, like the Roman. I seem to see the river Tiber foaming with much blood. That tragic and intractable phenomenon, which we watch with horror on the other side of the Atlantic, but which is interwoven with the history and existence of the states itself, is coming upon us here by our own volition and our own neglect. Those whom the gods wish to destroy, they first make mad. We must be mad, literally mad, as a nation, to be permitting the annual inflow of some 50,000 dependents, who are, for the most part, the material of the future growth of the immigrant-descended population. It is like watching a nation busily engaged in heaping up its own funeral pyre. Country, in 15 or 20 years' time, the black man will have the whip hand over the white man. I can already hear the chorus of execration. How dare I say such a horrible thing?
Welcome, sock puppets and sociopaths, to another episode, well, the second episode of 2026 of Streaming Consciousness. I am John McGowan, and my co-host Brian Marlowe is running a touch late because he's putting the kids to bed. So he's going to be joining us shortly, and we're covering off on the news of the week, which is, of course, Australia Day, which overflowed with raw, unbridled patriotism, oozing out of its every pore. I spoke in Tasmania. We had a really great time. I'm told all the other ones went really well. Numbers were down a little bit. I don't think that matters. People were more or less smart and safe. There were a few inevitable issues, as there always will be when thousands of people get together to explode in passion at the problems facing our country. But look, by and large, it was really good. And, optics wise, we had on the other side of the fence Invasion Day, the kind of miasma of the Australian left, the ideological blob that can't decide what they believe in, whether it's freedom for Palestine, freedom to, debase yourself, freedom to, take off your clothes and throw sticks in the bush. They did their usual song and dance routine, mostly dancing, a little bit of singing, and they burnt some flags and some bushes, and were pretty much irrelevant, more or less. The most interesting thing, to me, that came out of the coverage. Well, there's two interesting things come out of the coverage, but the first one is, although the media goes out of its way to say, oh, look at all these evil right-wing people, and they're out there proudly waving a flag with the Union Jack on it and not mourning the invasion of the country or whatever. Despite how bad they try to make it out to seem, every time they put it to air, they are listing the grievances. And they are listing the policies. They are articulating our messages every single time. Like the Tasmanian Mercury, who hates me more than anything and generally refuses to acknowledge I exist, were forced to give me 2 paragraphs today where they had to write up half my speech. Right? Because the only way for them to articulate how bad we all are is to repeat what we're saying. And this is what's creating the Rolling Stone, I think, the Rolling Stone effect that we're seeing come through in One Nation's vote, that we all see every day on X when we look at, all our follower numbers are going up, like people are engaging with us. But you see it on Instagram, you see it on Facebook, you're seeing it across the entire internet. This isn't just an echo chamber. This is something real that's happening. And that's kind of the beginning of it. We kind of won that battle in the last 2 days. In the lead up to it, during it, and in the aftermath. Today on 7:30 Report, right? A 7:30 Report journalist travelled up to Tamworth to spend the day with Barnaby Joyce for Australia Day, and had no choice but to run how popular he is and how well liked he is, and run all his messages, because they can't criticize you unless they give you that airtime. So that element of it's working really well. Obviously, there's some things that didn't go so well. You got the perennial complaint from the media about Nazis. But what's interesting is that it's really all they've got at this point. Like, they're not going after the substantive issues. That's all they have. They can just keep saying, oh, well, this time we've now gone from having, the scourge of neo-Nazis attending patriotic events to these now plainclothes Nazis. This is something that the 9 Fairfax, the 9 Fairfax Press actually running with. Someone just said that I posted the wrong YouTube link before. Is that true? Is that? Oh, let me have a look at this. Holy shit, you're right. It does say Leb Turbo. Huh. Wow, okay. That's typical fucking YouTube. They're conspiring against us. That's pretty funny. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. I'm looking forward to retweeting that. Yeah, so look, the whole thing was good. I have no complaints. There was the guy that got arrested, of course. And I don't know. I have very little sympathy for someone who is clearly reasonably well informed about the political situation in this country that decides to just stand up and say something that he knows will get him arrested. Like, you know, I have tremendous sympathy for Joel Davis. Like, he said something in Telegram that no person should be sitting in a prison cell for. But when you, like, the laws have passed, you know what the laws say, and you get up and you say it anyway. Like, I don't know, it was about martyrdom complex or something, but I just think that was dumb. You know, I listened to the speech. Actually, one interesting point is I noticed today on trying to rewatch the speech that it's mostly been taken down. There's very few versions of it left up. So obviously, you know, E. Karen's doing a sneaky business behind the scenes. Look, the first half of it, it only goes for like 40 seconds. The first half of what he said, you know, if he had left it at that, they probably still would have arrested him. But that's defensible. He stood up there and he said, these hate speech laws have been pushed by the Jewish lobby. That is objectively true. Now, how you say that in the current regime could land you in a prison cell. That's what we're all campaigning against. But he didn't stop there. Like, what he said afterwards was he deliberately knew that he was going to get into trouble. So I do have like diminished sympathy on that one. Fascinatingly, mixed version is the only one I've seen, actually, because I haven't seen a single one. Mixed VPN, obviously working overtime. There were no arrests at the Invasion Day rallies, though. Like, not one. Not a single one. And these guys burned the Australian flag, stamped on it, some kind of, you know, gender fluid, monstrous looking creature comes in off screen and spits on it. Like, it's terrifying. And no one copped anything for that. Faye says there was an arrest in Perth. Well, that was for the bomb thrower, right? That was, who knows what was going on there. Like, someone decided to throw an improvised explosive device into their rallies. So I made this point in my speech in Hobart. I said, you know, because we had an interesting situation in Tassie. They told us, we're happy to let you do it. They gave us one of the, like, we were in the nicest possible place you could do it, which is St. David's Park. We had like a beautiful rotunda. I felt like the Pope giving my speech from out like this balcony. But they just told us that these other guys applied to march like 3-4 months ago. They had a march route. They had like all the like security and everything. And they said, well, you can't march because you have to like apply a month in advance to do it. So you have to stay in this one spot. And of course, we had a lot of folks there who were kind of, they marched last time. They were told not to march as well last time, but they did it anyway. But I mean, the world was a much different place on August 31, 2025 to what it is today. So I had to get up and tell everyone, like, don't march. Just, you know, we've been given one rule. And, you know, and my point was, if there's one thing that Australia Day is about, it's the last 200 years of Australian history and all our achievements, chief amongst which is bringing to this country the rule of law. And the laws are wrong sometimes. I mean, I think the hate speech laws are wrong. I think the law that says I have to pay taxes is wrong. I think the law that says I can't smoke cigarettes in restaurants is wrong. But living in a Western civilization means you don't just break those laws to prove their point. You campaign to fix those laws. You don't just stand up when you know you're going to go to prison and say something dumb. So I thought that was disappointing. And, you know, I think the strength of a lot of their arguments in the past has been that they've skirted around these lines. The government has passed a suite of legislation specifically to stop them doing that. Now, that means you have to change where the line is. That means you have to campaign differently. And, you know, I think maybe without their senior leadership, things going askew with those guys. So we'll see how that plays out. There was other big political news throughout the week. There was the Nationals have left the Liberals. The coalition has. The media keeps saying the coalition has imploded. I didn't see what like it's the strangest kind of rhetoric. Like what about this is an implosion? It's by definition an explosion because these two things that were close together are now far apart. But that's just a little autistic niggle of mine. And if you guys have been following my tweets in the last 24 hours, particularly about the Australian of the Year, which I'll get to, I have been gripped by more autism than usual. So they haven't imploded, they've exploded. No one cares at this point. Like, the only people who care are the guys in the press gallery. That's it. Like, I don't think anyone in the Australian public cares. Today on this 7:30 report thing, they're walking around filming Barnaby talking to punters in Tamworth. No one came up to him and said, "Oh, what about the Nationals?" Everyone was just saying, "Well done for joining One Nation." No one out there gives a shit what the Nationals think. I doubt many. I mean, they had the new preferred Prime Minister rankings out yesterday. The one that's got Hanson squarely in the middle on 26. I doubt many Australians could name who the head of the National Party is. I struggle. I really struggle. I keep forgetting. I think, is it Micmac? I remember it's a Littlefinger. Like, a guy, if his eyes get any closer together, he's going to be a cyclops. He's terrifying. Like, he looks like something that would, climb out of the shadows in a David Lynch film. I can't stand that guy. But gold pills. Are you reporting me for hate speech because what I said about Little Proud? Or so no one cares what happens to the Nationals. Like, they're out. I mean, the smart Nats are now going to make a play to try and get a coalition with Fon. Hopefully Fon is smart enough to not fall for that, because why would you when you're doing better than these guys in the regions? If the Liberal Nationals coalition is sitting on 21% and One Nation is sitting on 23%, we know where the majority of One Nation supporters come from. What possible reason is there to cut deals? Like, they have to just put them in the ground. Like, the Nationals, I mean, I think we're going to need to, maybe change the Stream's slogan from total, since the Liberals are dead, effectively. We can't do TLD anymore. The only problem is I don't think we can say TND. I think if we say TND, we may get into trouble. So if anyone can think up a new funny catchphrase to articulate the fact that the Australian National Party needs to just end and go the way of the Liberals, then well, you've all just said TND now. You're all going to prison. I hope you like being in a tiny room. I don't really think that the Nationals have got much hope at this point. I mean, they have no talent. They got no one come through. Enoch just said, "What is TND?" No one tell him, please. No one actually say that. Yeah, TND staring at us like the Green Goblin mask. Yeah. So look, Australian. If before Brian gets here, just so I don't bore Brian, and I can just bore you guys in the intro with, like, people who know me offline will know this, that the two things I'm most autistic about are the John F. Kennedy assassination and, like, space ephemera, right? And so I was, like, personally aggrieved when not that the Australian government nominated who they did for Australian of the Year. I think she's made great contributions to Australian science, and she was a fantastic candidate for it, like better than all the other shitheels we end up getting doing it. My objection was, she's not a fucking astronaut, right? This whole, weaselly, oh, well, she's the first trained astronaut under the Australian flag. That's bullshit. Especially since we have a space agency, we don't have a space program. So it's actually very Australian when you think about it, that we basically sent her off to a foreign educational institution to get a meaningless qualification. And it meant, like, she had to get British. This was another thing. And actually, I think he's in here, was Bowering or someone actually pointed this out to me online, that she actually had to get British dual citizenship just to go do the course. So she didn't even really do it under the Australian flag. She did it under the British flag. These same people who are bragging about this, these are the ones that keep telling us borders don't matter. And yet they're obsessed with this idea that the flag on a flight suit matters. The flight suit for a country that doesn't own a spacecraft, right? Green Goblin, no, she has not been to space. Like, this is some of my weirdestly best performing tweets I've ever done. I noticed, oddly, I posted the names of the 3 actual Australian astronauts, right, who are some of the most incredible men this country has ever produced, starting with Chapman, who he was just like her. He was a trained astronaut and didn't go to space. He was a backup crew for the Apollo 14 mission. But he trained as an astronaut at NASA. Like, if anything could have happened, and he would have ended up going to space on Apollo 14. Not just going to space, going to the moon. He was meant to go to the moon. He was an Australian who was selected to do it. He was a Tiger Moth pilot. He was an accomplished mathematician, and I think eventually became a doctor in physics. When he didn't go to the moon, this is the most incredible thing about his story. When he didn't go to the moon, he went to Antarctica and lived there for 15 months. And while he's in Antarctica, I mean, looking out the little porthole of his Antarctic bunker, there's a mountain on the horizon, which is, moving, given what, the Trump propaganda machine has been churning out in the last week. And this guy literally went towards the mountain. Like, he just walked up it. And it was Mount Chapman. What was it called? Actually, it's in my my Twitter account. I'll tell you exactly what it was called, because what's funny is what he ended up naming it. So he climbs this mountain, and so it was called Chapman Ridge, after him, but he named it Mount Rumdoodle. He got to the top of this mountain in Antarctica and said, "Yeah, I'm going to call it Mount Rumdoodle." So he was our first Australian astronaut, didn't go to space. Second Australian who went to space was not an astronaut. And his name was Paul Scully Powers. He was a Royal Australian Navy scientist. He was an oceanographer, one of the most accomplished in his field. He went on a joint exchange program with the US Navy, where he was mapping eddies, like oceanic eddies. And during that process was when Skylab was put up, which, for those of you who are too young to remember or not obsessed enough, Skylab was a precursor to the International Space Station. It was a smaller permanent space station, which was for scientific research. And Powers put together a plan to be the first oceanographer to go up there and use it to map these eddies. It was approved. He got US dual citizenship so he could crew the mission. He was given astronaut scientist status, and he became the first Australian-born person to travel to space. And he was up on Skylab, not for very long. They never stayed up there for very long. Skylab was in the process of being brought down afterwards. He would end up being the first person to ever actually map an ocean eddy. Incredibly accomplished Australian scientist. Was actually honoured by the Australian government. And, I mean, there's pictures of him online holding Australian flags on Skylab while he's floating around. Incredible guy. The first Australian astronaut who actually went to space was, what was his name? It just left my brain. Andy Thomas was the first one who actually went up there. And he was in space for 144 days. 144 days. So, yeah, I got super pissed about that. And the worst bit is no one's talking about the key problem here, that we don't even have the technology to do this. We've sent like 8 satellites up, all of which semi-privately funded. I looked, someone was like arguing with me about it online, so I looked it up. And yeah, I mean, Australia has the closest Australia has to an actual space program is Jetstar, and they can get up 40,000 kilometers. So I think we need to fix that. I mean, that should be a one nation policy. All right, needs less is doing the Z's, so clearly that's getting boring. Sorry, guys. So let me. So I'm not going to be doing a stream of consciousness like space episode anytime soon. Scotty Tompkins says she's spacecraftless. Yes. Katy Perry is more of an astronaut than she is. It's not to say she's not an incredibly accomplished scientist. Like, they don't just let anyone into those programs. I mean, well, I guess you could probably get into them, but anyway, I was super mad about that. Yeah, I'm talking about white men who accomplish something. We don't do that in this country. Yeah, I mean, this becomes part of the issue with Australia Day, right? It's like the bureaucrats behind this stuff are kind of like, Netflix TV show producers. Like, they can't just look at something and say, who would be best for this? Like, who actually deserves this? It's this matrix of well, we got to have an immigrant, and we got to have a woman, and if she's disabled, that'd be good. And we got to have a person with a disordered sexual life. Like everyone has to get a Guernsey, and it doesn't matter what you actually did. And that's the kind of thing that's just driving people in this country crazy. And this is how you end up with people marching in the streets eventually. Yeah. So yeah, we had that was more reasonably interesting. The hate speech laws finally passed last week. ASIO can now just outlaw a hate group. You get 15 years in prison for organizing, 7 years for members. Like everyone knows this stuff already. It's interesting because you think, well, that's really bad. It would make sense to campaign on, repealing it. But honest to God, man, I think we need to campaign on using it. And, one day a reactionary government will come to power in this country, and we will use those laws to target the kinds of people who burned our flag on Australia Day, to target the kinds of people who produce so-called political collateral that says, white people should be subject to genocide, that says that our country is stolen, that says that our country is illegitimate. We will make all those things eligible to have you arrested under hate speech laws. That's what should be coming down the pipe. And I just hope it happens soon enough so people like Tony Burke can see it. I want him crying on TV saying, this wasn't what I meant when I passed the put everyone in prison laws. I didn't mean put everyone in prison. Yeah, that's my dream. Like the first time it gets used against someone they don't like. But I mean, look, it kind of happened in the last 24 hours because I had no idea who this guy was. The pro-Israel influencer that they've denied entry to the country. You guys seen this? I could look him up, but I can't be bothered. You'll know who I'm talking about. But yeah, he's some kind of pro-Israel guy. Like he seems totally harmless. Like he just seems utterly harmless. Like he just says completely regular pro-Israel agitprop that wouldn't look out of place on Sky News. But Burke has rejected his visa. He can't come into the country. And of course, they're all losing their minds now. All these people who said, yeah, we need all these laws. Tony Burke needs to deport all these people. And now he's like applying the law to them. And yeah, they're super mad about it. So that was a little bit of kind of enjoyable irony in the last 24 hours. They're all twisting themselves in knots about that. I think we said this in the last episode, Tony Burke's just got the biggest goddamn balls in Australian politics. He really does. So he's just had this total shit show of a negotiation over hate speech laws that have been explicitly been called for by the Jewish lobby. And then when the dust settles and they're all done and you'd think he'd just walk off into the night and they go, God, glad we don't have to deal with the Jewish lobby again for a while. He just takes one of their guys and says, no, you can't come into the country. Big balls Burke. That's what we're calling him. Yeah, we love Tony Burke here. Well, we don't love him. We're going to put him in prison when we get into Parliament, but he's got some huge balls on him. Yeah. So that was fun. That was a fun bit of malarkey. Look, gun laws are still going on. I don't know. Does anyone even here really care about gun laws? I assume none of you guys are even old enough to own guns. But anyway, it was interesting watching the 7:30 report tonight because the Barnaby is obviously getting a lot of shit about gun laws up in the country. So I think the gun laws thing might heat up, particularly in the state regional races. It'll probably be a particular thing in the South Australian thing, in the South Australian election. So keep watching brief on that. I mean, I just don't like the gun guys generally, just because our country has been, circling the drain now for a decade. And, a lot of us didn't see it, but the writing was probably on the wall a lot earlier than that. The vanguard of so much conservatism in our country are these rural people, regional people. And they have just had the only thing on their radar for a decade while all this was happening was, oh, please don't take my guns away. Please don't take my 6 bolt action shitty Italian rifles. Really, dude? You're going to do Red Dawn with your bolt action 303? I don't get. No, I don't have much respect for them. it was a deliberate thing. I worked with a lot of gun lobbyists over the last few years, and it's like a deliberate thing that they say and do to each other. They're like, hey, don't rock the boat on any other issue because you'll lose your guns. They'll come down on you. So it's just rich for them now to be saying, this is the biggest campaign. We've got to make sure that we can still have 6 lever action cowboy guns to defend ourselves. Well, they didn't say shit this whole time when free speech was being eroded, when, police were arresting people, when they're letting 1 million odd migrants into the country, when they turn on the TV every night and you're being told your country doesn't exist. We did not see the gun lobby, activate their membership for anything other than their cowboy guns. So I don't care about them. Don't care about the gun laws. You can bitch and moan about it all you want, but enjoy cosplaying as John Wayne with your Adler. What else went on this week? So the polls. I think we just saw the 23% polls. I think last week when we did the stream, it's been like one more since then, which has One Nation. Like in that poll, it's 22%, but that poll had everyone's quantum down 1%. That could actually be a slightly more accurate poll because it might be showing some of the minor parties. And yeah, I don't think there has been much of a move though. And I'm locked in on my prediction last week that One Nation will hit 30% by July. I think it's 100% going to happen. Maybe more. I don't want to anyone to kind of quibble with me if they hit 31 or something. It'll be over 30 by July at the rate they're going. It's going to be neck and neck with Labor. Who we got from the chat? Chat, throw me some stuff because I'm fading. Guys, this is why you've been saying to me for like a year, hey, you should do a podcast. And you're on that. Look at it. It sucks, man. I mean, 10 minutes. I'm fading. I got to sit here and just keep talking. It's like dating Chinese girls. They don't speak any English, which has been happening to me a lot lately. SOCPod says, where did that flicked past? What about the propaganda Discord plot to abduct Albo? I don't know, man. I think a lot of this stuff's probably legit. It's just that they're just making a big song and dance out of it now. But I've worked pretty close to politicians at that level a few times in my careers, and man, they get this shit all the time. Do you know? I've heard this quite reliably that Julia Gillard had the record for the most death threats ever. She was getting them there was a room there that they were just getting the Gillard death threats in hour to hour. In New South Wales was Christina Keneally. The women get it worse than the men. Because if you're a schizo and you're the kind of person who's going to write a letter to the Prime Minister saying that, you're probably going to have more beef with a woman than a man. It's probably just how your brain's wired. So yeah, I don't doubt that all this stuff's legit. I just think these guys have probably been arrested. They probably arrested guys for doing this to John Howard. They probably arrested, certainly maybe with Rudd as well. But you just don't hear about it. They probably just didn't want to make a big deal out of it. Of course, the times we live in mean they're making a big deal out of it. And yeah, so I do think it's legit. Someone said to do my Werner Herzog voice. I will, but the problem is I'm just talking nonstop, waiting for Brian to get here. I'm not even slightly buzzed yet. So I got to be slightly buzzed to do the Werner Herzog voice. I might read your comments out in it. Yeah. We did the homemade bomb. Thoughts on the new series of Fearon? Sublime, beautiful work of art. You know what? My most controversial take is I think Fearon is better than Lord of the Rings, and I'm going to die on that hill. I might do a whole Substack about this soon, about how it is actually better than Lord of the Rings. What's your view on Christina Keneally's AO? You know what? At the time, we all fucking hated Christina Keneally, couldn't stand her, and she was a terrible premier. Don't get me wrong, but as the years have rolled on, I have a lot more respect for Christina Keneally because she was a seriously right-wing politician. Right? She was from the end. She was from the final days of Labor right. I mean, and she was like, I think she was Catholic, and she was one of those women from that period of Labor who was kind of holding back the damn wall on some of the kind of cultural madness that would end up coming. And now that I'm well and truly out of the Liberals and like I don't really care about their political fortunes anymore, and I can have a bit more clarity and objectivity, I particularly have a lot of respect for the Labor guys in that period who did that, because there was a lot of them. Like, I think the Labor people from that period, people like Keneally, like Morris Yemmer, like Bob Carr before he went utterly insane, and some of the Labor right wingers who are in Canberra, they were. I think history will recognise them as having made a greater contribution to conservatism in our country than any of the Liberals that would subsequently come after, because that is essentially what all these people were doing, was conservative praxis, right? They were sitting there in these rooms, they were having those arguments saying, no, now's not the right time to legalize gay marriage, to call it Invasion Day, to plaster rainbow flags and pastels everywhere. Like that, these were the people having those discussions. I mean, Christina Keneally was held back the damn wall on abortion laws, right? And which vexed her greatly. She was a staunch feminist. She was also Catholic, but was kind of in this, like, I mean, the contemporary, like the last known good settings on abortion laws in New South Wales were Christina Keneally's, where it was illegal with exceptions. And, didn't kind of think of it like this at the time, because back then, I mean, the right was even more crazier than they are now, but crazier on these issues. And the left were smarter and more accommodating. But that kind of pissed everyone off, like literally everyone off. But it turned out to be the exact right policy setting. Like if you were going to make like the perfect statute book for a sustainable centre-right government, those would actually be the abortion laws, Christina Keneally's ones. So, yeah, I have a lot of respect for Keneally. She's kind of sexy too, like if we're being real. She had something going on. She was funny as well. Needsless says, how long until the based libs join One Nation? Okay, I got to call you out on that one. Name a based lib. And don't cheat by saying Andrew Hastie, because he proved his true colours in the hate speech debate. So, the better question is, will One Nation let the least based libs in? Because there's going to be some guys, right? Like some of these, I mean, this is like, I've said this so many times, the defining feature of the libs is believing in nothing. So how long until some of these so-called moderates want to jump ship and realize it's better for them to be in One Nation? And can they form a moderate wing of One Nation? Like, are they going to allow that? Like, are they going to let James McGrath's the kind of guy I could imagine doing it? Like, it's one of these like hollow men that believes in nothing, from the moderates going, yeah, fuck it, I'm going to jump over. Someone just said respect to Antic for voting against the hate speech laws. Yeah, I mean, but as someone pointed out, I think to me last week, a lot of that comes from the fact that like they can't do shit to Antic. Like Antic's got a lockdown on his division, so he can just do whatever he wants. Yeah, so I don't think that's going to happen. Menzies Light says, imagine Chris Rath joining One Nation. So this is the kind of scenario I'm envisaging. Like post One Nation hitting 30%, I think there's going to be like a string of well, maybe not defections, but like attempted defections from the moderates of these guys jumping over. Zoe Cabina Zoe Booth Cabina posted something funny today. She posted one of these. I don't know if you guys have been noticing it on X, but there's like a lot of emerging patriotism influences in Australia Day, string bikinis. Like I noticed it in my analytics because I always like to laugh at how low my female engagement is, and when it ticks up, something's going on. And so it's now just cresting at 15%. When I think like a year ago it was like on 4%. And you can go online, you're seeing more and more women saying this stuff, and it turns out like putting on string bikinis and posting it for thirst engagement. But it's kind of like the meme, right? That women pass all information through a consensus filter. So this is why I'm so confident on One Nation getting to 30%, because what we're seeing right now it's the coming together of people who already openly say this stuff and think this stuff. And they're all now under the One Nation banner, so they're statistically noticeable for the first time. But now that everyone can see it, now that it's not atomized through minor parties and the Liberals, and you've got the big fat number there, there's going to be a whole cohort of women, because we all know women can be way more conservative than they appear to be. And now they're all going to start coming over, because it's now becoming socially safer to say you want to stop mass migration, to say you're uncomfortable with multiculturalism, to say all the things that Pauline Hanson's saying. If an ordinary, everyday 24-year-old woman 2 years ago repeated Pauline Hanson talking points, she would know she was doing so taking her professional and social life into her hands. But she can now do that today, safe in the knowledge that there's 23% of the country that thinks the same thing. So the consensus filter is, that hasn't kicked into One Nation's primary vote yet. We haven't seen that yet, but I think we're going to see it. And the media loves to pathologize these things. I guarantee you, at some point in the next few months, we're going to see the phenomenon of Zoomer 22-year-old women joining One Nation. It'll be like some kind of think piece in the Guardian, going, "What's happening to the girls?" I could see that coming down the pipe. Nito says the power structure hasn't changed, though. No, you're right, but they don't realize that. I mean, the whole thing about adapting your political ideology through a consensus filter is that you're not very smart to begin with. You're the kind of person that will do something because everyone else is doing it. You're not going to stop and go, well, actually, the only thing that's changed is the quantum number. The actual situation hasn't changed. Yeah. Sebastian says, do you think it would be a mistake to join One Nation? No, dude, I think everyone should join something. I mean, we've been saying this for a year, right? Like, join a political party, do something, engage in any kind of activism or in some kind of professional capacity. Just keep doing stuff. That's what everyone has to do. And if you think One Nation's a place to go, do it. Because right now I don't think there's many other options. Gold Pilled AI says, John, is it true they've approached you to play Hagrid in a Hobart Theatre production of Harry Potter? No, they have not, but they should. Sharon Ankove says people should join NSN. You mean the organization that doesn't exist anymore? I'm surprised that there hasn't been a split-off group like with the IRA. Like whenever the IRA would disband, and because of the kind of political sensitivities, and then the real IRA would start, or the original IRA. Like I'm expecting any day now to see some guy in like a ski mask on a YouTube video claiming to be from the real NSN. I think that'll happen. Libertarians are a disaster. Libertarians don't know what they're doing anymore. It's like the old Michael Lind quote, like, no one's ever proved why anyone should take them seriously, least of all libertarians. What else we got going on, chat? I'm running out of juice. I was so tired after Australia Day. And as you may have noticed, I was pretty tanked as well. I was just sinking beers all afternoon. I was annoyed that... Not annoyed, I had a lot of fun at the actual event. I met a lot of really cool people. But I was just tired after the whole thing. It's taxing, talking to people. John, Metro seat most likely to fall for One Nation. Well, not really a... let me just pull it up. It's not really a Metro seat, but I would say... The one I think what's it called now? McNamara on the Central Coast is probably the closest they can get to a Metro, would be my view. McNamara on the Central Coast. I don't check. I couldn't pull it up because my keyboard's not plugged in, but it might have changed its name. But it's the one Lucy Wicks used to have. And yeah, I think some of those like outer suburban seats are likely. Is it Dobell now? I don't know. I don't even know what those seats are called. I forgot all that stuff. My brain's like, like what's like Harry Potter, where they have like the stick and they take the thoughts out of their head. I did that when I left politics. I stopped having to think about all of that stuff. John, do you think Jared Rennick will join One Nation? Absolutely not, man. I really don't think, Bruce. I hope you're not the Bruce. I don't, did Bruce sneak into my chat? Oh no! Someone just said McNamara's Melbourne. I'm thinking of not Lucy Wicks, the woman called McNamara who was in the Central Coast seat. So that would be Dobell. Yeah, it's that seat. It's the one I'm thinking of. Do I think Jared Rennick will join One Nation? Absolutely not. Like, have you heard this guy? Rennick is. People call him autistic. I don't think that's it. I just think he's kind of like pathologically stubborn and annoying, you know. And you can tell that. I didn't realize this. A friend of mine in Queensland told me this the other day, which I had no idea about. That Rennick only lost that pre-selection by 3 votes. Like, that's how much. Yeah, McNamara and Dobell. Thank you. That's how close he was to winning. It wasn't like the Liberal Party turned on Jared Rennick. And Rennick's gone, well, I'm going to take my plucky brand of, you know, Citizens Electoral Council, Lyndon LaRouchian nonsense on the road. Like, no, he was still a well-respected Liberal candidate. He could have stayed on the ticket further down. He could have run somewhere else. I mean, he keeps telling everyone what a successful businessman he is or accountant or whatever. Like, he could have just chilled out for 3 years. But instead, he just goes, no, fuck you. I'm starting my own thing. And I made this point in my speech. I said, you know, people like me have been sitting here and you guys have been listening to me for months and months and months saying, maybe we should start our own party or we have a Vanguard or something like that. Like, but the public makes up their own mind. The public decides things. That's how it works. And in politics, often you're in the right place at the right time and you just have to respond to it, which is what is happening to Pauline Hanson now. Someone tweeted something fascinating to me yesterday that I appeared in a socialist magazine. I was quoted in there saying this, that, you know, it's not a case of Pauline Hanson hasn't been like plugging away to get our support. This is just what's happened. She's in the right place at the right time. Rennick in that last federal election was that guy. He was in the right place at the right time. You had fucking these Rennick groypers. You had people projecting their desperate need for a reactionary alternative onto Jared Rennick, and Jared Rennick spat on it, like openly. Every single person he spoke to, he said the same thing, that he wasn't with us on immigration, that he really only wanted to talk about the economy, that he wasn't even really with us on a lot of the culture war stuff either, right? But so he took all that was being projected onto him by a pre-made support base, and he threw it back in everyone's face. So on that basis, if One Nation is smart enough to know that, he shouldn't be allowed in, because this is what he's like. And I mean, 2, I just think it shows his personality trait, that he's not going to switch. Ben just said, yeah, I said repeatedly he was a guy. Well, I said he was in the mix to be the guy. Like, he was good back before we knew all this about him. I mean, and because like, we were all seeing the same content being put out by his supporters that led everyone to believe this. And then when you see him up close, as soon as people, the kind of Rennick obsession only lasted for as long as our guys started coming back from meetings with him. The Rennick wave kind of crashed as soon as he started branches. And you had people coming back online, having been and seeing him in meet space. And they're going, no, have you actually met this guy? Like, yeah. So yeah, Ben's right. I probably did say at the time he was a great candidate, but yeah, I've never met him. I actually still haven't met him, but everyone who went and did it then came back and delivered this same message. He said, no, this guy's out there saying, and remember that time when he said he argued with the March for Australia guys about immigration, and he even when his immigration policy wasn't that bad, he's like such a bad communicator that you had all these like Cro-Magnon heads in their chat going, he said it's going to be 60,000 more people. Like, he can't even communicate the most basic ideas. So Jared Rennick called us feral racist. Yeah, exactly. Right. Lee Kuan Yew, respect up, who's one of our top posters, who's just blown up on the scene recently. Did I catch Matthew Knott from The Age and SMH on Insiders? Yeah, man, I did. It was funny. This is unrelated to what he said. I was watching it with my parents, and he came on, and mum kind of looked at him and went, "What's wrong with that guy?" And my dad's like looking at him, going, "Is there something wrong with him?" And my parents were saying, "Is he deaf? Like, does he have a hearing problem?" Because he's got the accent. He's got a strange voice, right? But yeah, I did watch what he said. Man, do you know how many people watch Insiders? Have you actually seen the numbers on it? Now, you know I don't like to do this because I get distracted with it, but let me just check. Yeah, dude, I've got more viewers right now than Insiders gets, right? Insiders, I mean, were it not for hospitals, and replaying it in social studies on Mondays in schools, like, they wouldn't even crack 50,000, dude. The audited figures probably, I imagine the audited figures will probably put them at like 300,000 or something, but those are horse shit. Man, who cares what they say on Insiders? It's meaningless. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest white pills I was giving people when I saw them on Australia Day. That, when we did this, when we did it in Tassie, I mean, and we had the march in August, I think I made a big deal out of picking on the journos in the crowd. I love doing that because I hate it so much. Like, they say, I feel unsafe because he's telling everyone to hate us. It's funny, and then they leave. They left on Sunday, actually. The biggest white pill is that decline in mainstream media audiences. It's not like a step ladder. Like, it just doesn't stay steady and then goes down and then goes back up a little bit and then goes back down. It's every single day. So if you pick any point in time, like, I can guarantee you their viewership has gone down, and we can, between August and now, and we can guarantee that for the simple reason that every single day, little old ladies and little old men die in hospitals. And when old people die, those mainstream media consumers are not being replaced. They simply are not being replaced. Right? So their audiences are declining, like longitudinally, they will keep on declining. So however relevant criticism of our movement, the new right movement in the broadest possible sense, whatever criticism they were making in August of last year is now, however many little old ladies have died since August, less relevant, because that's how much their audience has declined. And they're just going to keep going down. And eventually, the only relevance they'll be able to cling on to, which is the same for things like the New York Times and some of the major mastheads in the US, is like a very narrow advertiser base. And so here it'll be two major supermarkets, the gambling industry, Harvey Norman. But I mean, over the next 5 years, right, some kind of supermarket reform is inevitable. Two supermarkets isn't sustainable. They may even become further atomized. The gambling industry is like a perennial whipping boy, and internally they are taking radical reforms as well in terms of how they market themselves and how their operations work at a technological level. So their need for form guides for coverage is going to diminish and diminish and diminish. The sports industry is, the Australian sports media industry is going to have to catch up with the way the United States do it. So they're going to be less and less relevant. And so you are just going to be left with this newspaper being funded by 2 pages that Jerry Harvey takes out every week to sell you on, I don't know, 5 years, like your humanoid robot, right? Base Australian history says government advertising. So that's really interesting because the states, every time a Liberal government gets into government, they cut that. So in New South Wales, it was the impetus for so much of, and I think we were talking about this on Twitter during the week, like how great Service New South Wales is and how that app is really good. But I mean, that's how that started with Barry O'Farrell back in 2011, because he said, I hate the media and I'm going to take away every single dollar that we give them. But we have all these requirements for how we advertise things and how we send out information. So they started at first principles from the digital side of it. And everyone's been doing that. Eventually, Conservatives are going to get back in at a federal level at a time. I mean, the only reason they've never done that federally was because the last time the Libs were in, was before, well, when they got in, was when Sky was still Sky News was still reasonably relevant. I mean, Sky's numbers are collapsing. You know, I mean, they do a little bit better than you expect because they've got all the rural audiences. But so, and plus they got News Corporation, so they didn't want to piss them off because Daily Telegraph needs all this money. So yeah, man. Today it's worse for them. It'll be worse tomorrow. It gets worse the next day and the next day and the next day. You know, we couldn't have done this kind of stuff that's happening now, the marches, the rise of One Nation, you know, the kind of growing trend, particularly amongst young men, to be more open, challenging ideas like multiculturalism and the erosion of our sovereignty and the denigration of our culture. All these things we could not have done even 5 years ago, with the power and influence that the Australian mainstream media wielded, right? The reason we are doing them, one of the chief reasons, is the collapse in that relevance and influence. And it hasn't just collapsed and has hit a point where it's going to remain steady. It's just collapsing every single day. Every single little old lady, and it's sad when this happens. I like little old ladies. But every little old lady who dies, it's just one less dollar going into Kerry Stokes and, I mean, Rupert Murdoch, I don't think he even sees much of this money anymore. So yeah, that's a white pill. Maxan98, what's your opinion on Nick Fuentes? Hey, I like him, but you guys got to remember, I am twice as old as a lot of you, and so it's like, whilst when people share clips of him with me, I always like his stuff, and I always tend to agree with him, actually. But I don't watch it. I don't even watch myself on this. It's strange. I mean, going back to that point about the decline in media, I mean, that's why I say, like, the defining kind of feature in the decline of influence in media is just people dying, because it doesn't matter how, you know, what your kind of tastes are. Like, it's really just an age thing. Like, I talk to guys who tell me, like, honestly, I'm surprised half of you even watch this. Like, it shocks me. Like, when we did this first space, and there were like 100 of you guys in there, and then you know, we did the first one of these, it was a couple of thousand, and when I just watch the comment section, I see how many people comment. Like, shocks me that anyone spends their time doing this. I don't do it. I would never. I mean, the most this kind of content I think I've ever sat through and watched would be, I watched both the debates with Donald Trump and JD Vance on Rogan. I watched all those. I think I've watched maybe like one Rogan episode with Weinstein, the physicist, and I watched the clips online. I would just never see myself watching this kind of stuff. So yeah, I like that Nick Fuentes exists, and it's clear, like, it's absolutely clear that this is the future of media. That's why I do it. Like, but yeah, unfortunately I don't really know that much about him. I'm sure he's cool though. Someone said, what's the progress on that first paid Substack article? That's a funny story, actually. That is a really funny story, because I deleted it. I deleted the whole thing. I had a massive change of heart. And I'll tell you the background to it. I actually had an offer from a publisher to do a Lehrman book from late last year. And I like money, and actually not much in the grand scheme of things. Like these commissions for books, they're like between 30 and 40,000. They're not that much. But I thought it'd be cool, and like, this is a kind of vanity thing, to have my name on a book cover would be cool. And so yeah, that was the main reason I started doing it. And then, because I'm a difficult person, and also the people involved with that weren't very cool, so I decided. And well, the other thing was that I realized very quickly was that my Substack would, over the next 2 to 3 years, which is kind of like the editing and release cycle on a lot of this stuff, and before you start to see money, the 3 years of me doing, like, shifting to paid Substack would make a lot more money than the sales on this book would be. Even like the most generous projections on what a book would sell, far less than what the least generous projections, like just based on my current numbers, of what my Substack would do if I did it. So that's why I was saying for a while, I'm going to do like a series of paid pieces on Substack about that whole thing. But then, of course, I actually had to sit down and write it. And so I finally have had time, like end of the year and everything. And so I sat down and started putting pen to paper. And started like psychologically harrowing, a lot of it. And I probably had never really reconciled myself how upsetting that whole thing was dealing with it, dealing with him. Obviously, it wasn't as upsetting as being allegedly raped or being allegedly lied about being raped, whichever version you believe. But I was in it for a whole heap of time with him, and reflected on me, and I had to, I think I had some like what's that word the left use, like some kind of like secondhand trauma or something from it. So it was unpleasant, but while I was writing, I found, and this is gonna, like, you guys know what I'm like, right? So you take this the right way, but I found that I was just boring writing about someone else, and I was more interested when I was writing about me. And so this, like, I wrote a fair bit. Like, I think I wrote about 40,000 words. And I, while I was reading, I was like, the only interesting parts of this are the bits where I'm in it. And anything about the kind of politics of it, anything about Bruce, it wasn't interesting to me. I wasn't writing it particularly well. And I also had this kind of like, this is not really my story. Like, I was just doing it for money, and I thought as soon as that popped into my head, I realized that's what fucks you with that whole thing, right? Because everyone who's got into it to try and make money out of it ends up bankrupt and with their lives and careers destroyed. And so, weirdly, I even did this sober. I just got the whole thing and I deleted it. So no, fuck that. And I took some of the notes I did. Some of the funnier anecdotes just about me, and which he's in as well. And so, I mean, I don't think I'll even put it up on Substack paid. I think it'll just be another free Substack article. But I've got a series coming called the Year of Smear, which is just some funny stories about sex, drugs, and dirt from that period between 2019 and about 2022. So yeah, so I'm gonna do that instead. Maybe Bruce will write his own book. The only person who could write an interesting book about it is actually Higgins, I think. But she's got her own problems. Daniel Jones says YouGov poll just out has One Nation at 25%. 30% by July, guys. I told you. Max Sand 98 asks, why not X or paragraph XYZ? You know why? It's because I have two laptops, got a desktop computer. I actually write a lot of stuff on my phone, and I take copious voice notes. And it's X's draft system is the thing that shits me off most. And I don't like using word processors. I don't like having that many apps installed. So I love Substack. You can just write stuff in there and saves it. It's great. Yeah. So yeah, can someone link us to that YouGov poll? I'll have a look at it while I'm on stream. We'll do some live feedback. Steely Danjoy says you get assassinated if you did a Lemon book. Yeah, that's another consideration. Maybe if I had stuck with, like, maybe I will kind of revisit elements of it again, but from scratch, because I'd kind of imagined it as being this kind of like gonzo-ish, like on the road with Bruce and John, just like, doing copious amounts of cocaine and, all the kind of like things you've read about in the media, like doing all that part of it. But in the background of this was actually something really serious I wanted to write about, which was, because hand on heart, I have no idea what happened. Like, Bruce told me his version. I probably read more evidence than anyone else other than the cops and the lawyers. And I still don't know. It's 50-50 in my head. But my like concrete view was that the guilty party in the entire affair was the Australian media. And from all sides, the left-wing journalists who, put this poor girl who'd obviously been in a lot of trouble, made some mistakes, but also had a lot of like bad things done to her beyond like whatever happened in that room, without her having been to the cops or given any kind of opportunity to properly investigate it. This unprecedented thing, like it had never happened before in Australian politics. It had never happened. I don't think it had even happened before in the reporting of news that a journalist had taken an alleged rape victim and put him on TV and said, hey, this is an alleged rape victim. She's going to tell you all about what happened to her, but it's never been investigated and she hasn't even spoken to the police about it. That's where it starts. And then it starts with the next day when news.com picks it up. And then it's like this rolling stone of just failure after failure after failure, and the media getting into this feeding frenzy. And then it flips because the media are, proper journalists, the people who are bad. So many journalists today are bad because they're incompetent, but I'm talking about the people who are bad because they're competent. They then flip the whole narrative because ultimately what a lot of these people are is just contrarians. And so you go from the strong and brave Brittany Higgins narrative to the maybe she's a lying wench narrative. And that's manufactured by the media. Now, working for Bruce, we exploited that massively. But I'm sitting there the whole time and I can see what's happening. Like, these people don't care. Like, these people want a counter narrative to attract a bigger audience. And so what they were doing was just as bad. And then when you do that counter narrative, they'll end up being a counter narrative from the other side, which is why I use that Rolling Stone analogy. Like, it just gets bigger and more laden with shit and more stupidity, and it's compounded by the stupidity of all the people around it. It's compounded by this massive dose of self-interest because you're threatening people's careers, which is all Lisa Wilkinson wanted in the first place. Lisa Wilkinson did it to go after the careers of people she didn't like. You read her actual writing. You read the stuff she writes. She hates. People thought she did it because she hated Scott Morrison. That's not true. She hates these women in the Liberal Party. She considers them traitors to femininity. Right? It was about going after people like Linda Reynolds and Michaelia Cash. So that's kind of how the whole thing starts, with this kind of self-interested attack that no one was smart enough to just say, hey, we shouldn't be doing this. This is going to turn ugly. What any good journalist should have done was said, yeah, I'll write the story when we get a press release from the cops to say this. They're investigating it. Right? That's not how it went down. Look how it turned out. So many fucking lies were on. And I don't know. The whole thing was crazy. I think it's probably one of the worst things that ever happened in Australian politics. I say that pretty confidently. It's still going on. I mean, I would say, like, conservatively, it's maybe at least once a fortnight. They're still doing a story about it. Like, I saw a piece yesterday. Brittany in America doing a fucking Netflix documentary or something. Breadmaker says, how about David Shiraz getting involved? I mean, we obviously during that whole period we had to have a certain view on David Shiraz, which was expressed through Sky News and Telegraph. But dude, I always had a lot of respect for him, for the simple reason that what would you do, putting aside whether or not the story was true or not, what would you do if someone came to you and said that it happened to your girlfriend, right? Like, what you do is determined by what your skill set is, right? If Brittany Higgins had been dating Ben Roberts-Smith, Bruce would have had his fucking hands cut off and been kicked off a bridge, right? But she wasn't dating Ben Roberts-Smith. She was dating a guy with a skill set identical to mine. And so the only thing David Shiraz could do to make his girlfriend feel better was say, maybe we'll do a yarn. And he was pretty good at his job too, right? He stood those stories up. So yeah, everyone hates on David Shiraz. I would have done the same thing. I would have done the exact same thing. I can't even think of, I mean, I would have done better, but I can't think of much I would have done differently, right? So, yeah, I never had thought he was a bad guy. Honestly, I don't think any of them were bad people. I mean, the only people in that whole thing who I think were bad people were the newspaper editors and the journalists. Like, they're the only ones, right? Bruce wasn't a bad guy. Like Bruce is good. He wasn't a good guy, but he wasn't a bad guy. It was Bruce was kind of like in a values sense, not that much different to me. It was just an ex-political staffer who got into a whole bunch of trouble and needed help getting out of it. Higgins wasn't a bad person, right? I mean, maybe I just have an overabundance of empathy, but I certainly thought during the trial, like when we were, getting all those like piles of documents to the lawyers' offices, I had an enormous amount of empathy for her. Like, if you go back through those Daily Mail stories that were coming out in the wake of that, some of the stuff was actually like that she did was actually kind of funny. Like there was one, I think, do you remember when they were doing that whole like the series of attacks on the Labor women they were in connection with, in touch with, and there was this story about how Laura Tingle was just being ghosted by Brittany Higgins. I think that was one of the funniest ones to come out, which was like Tingle starts sending her these like real like, oh, I'm so sorry what happened to you, Brittany, messages. And then as the months go on and she never gets replied to, she starts sending her like really curt, like, I'm asking you questions on the record messages. I thought Brittany's conduct on some of that stuff was pretty funny. But I don't think there are any bad people involved, apart from the journalists who exploited I mean, it's one thing to exploit a political crisis, right? It's one thing to even exploit a geopolitical crisis for ad space, right? Like, I mean, when they went to Venezuela the other day, you remember the old the World Today satire, war, like, I mean, newspapers have been doing that kind of shit all the time. But to do it over an alleged rape in those circumstances was just beyond the pale, right? That's why I there's some well-publicized things that I did during that period that were pretty bad, but I never did anything as bad as what the media did, right? And I could always say they started it, right? Yeah. Flynn says, "Were you still involved when Bruce made the fatal mistake to sue for defo?" No. Oh, well, I was there when he made the choice to do it. I had Bruce and I stopped talking on. It was the long weekend for the NRL AFL Grand Final in, I think, 2004. Or maybe 2003. What year did I? Yeah, it would have been 2003. Right before his trial was due to begin. And it was a huge mistake. He should never have done that. But you know what? Again, right? Bruce was being told, by every single lawyer in the country he was going to win that. Every single lawyer. He was being told by every single conservative figure, newspaper editor, like everyone was telling him he was going to win and he was going to make millions of dollars. And like him and I were friends, but also like we hung around each other a lot, and I think he knew, like, I might be possessed of insight, but I'm not possessed of wisdom. And I thought he took with a pinch of salt, and I said, "Don't do it." And he listened to the lawyers and everyone else. Yeah. Flynn adds, "I can't make any sense of any defo judgment. I'd have just taken a long holiday after the criminal trial collapsed." Well, he was so lucky in the criminal trial, right? I was just pure luck. I mean, some may even say fate, but yeah. Lee Kuan Yew, respecter, says that's actually the best explanation I've heard to explain Shiraz's actions. Yeah, dude, and you should ruminate on that. That the only good explanation for this stuff you've ever heard is in the middle of the night from a noted schizo on his live stream, and no one reflected on this at the time, because at the time, how these guys were all making money was you either had to be a strong and brave David Shiraz respecter, or you had to believe that he was some kind of psychopath. This whole thing, it was like a black hole that sucked up nuance. It was like this singularity at the center of Australian political life that all decency and kind of intelligence was getting sucked into and spaghettified. Like until there was nothing left, and that's why it was too hard to write. It was too boring. So, what you guys just got there in the last 15 minutes, that is my entire memoir on the Lehrman affair. That's it. What else we got coming out of the chat? Oh, just to finish though, Senex says, do you think they all genuinely believe their version of the story? 100%. 100%. I don't think any of them are lying. I know Bruce isn't lying. Like, I spent enough time with him to know he isn't lying. And actually, I think Higgins' story makes a lot of sense, except for the bit where she identifies him. Something bad happened to her. Maybe it was at some point. Like, who knows? I think she was also telling the truth about a lot of the bad conduct that went on into office and stuff that went on too. But they all believe it. It's in their heads. Like, it's not going anywhere. Like, you're not going to wake up one day and see Bruce and Brittany like recanting their stories to their biographers. Like, that's not going to happen. That'll never happen. They will take the story to their graves. But it is what it is. Yeah. Breadmaker says, can you give background on what the jurors saw that got the trial cancelled? So I'm surprised this wasn't properly ventilated at the time, because this was all public information. The judge had to come out and say it at the end. But the only thing we don't know is, so what we were led to believe was that there was a holdout in the jury, because remember, it had been going for like 2 to 3 weeks at that point. Just wait, they was fucking around, couldn't make a decision. One of them was a holdout. There's been all kinds of bullshit written about it. Some people think that it was 11 supported Bruce and 1 thought he was guilty, and other people say it's the other way around. The truth is, no one knows. But what we do know is that in response to that, someone, we don't know which one of the jurors it was, whether it was one of the holdouts or one of the other ones, they brought in a stack of documents, original research. They'd gone online and they'd Googled a bunch of stuff, and they brought it in. Now, we don't know if it was for their own benefit or to show the other jurors, but that's a massive no-no in a jury, right? It spilled out of a folder. One of the sheriffs saw it, notified the judge, and it was declared a mistrial. I think it was either Sam Maiden, or it might have been McClymont. One of them found out what it was, and it was it was documents about the prevalence of women lying about rape, and it was a government a government report that had come out on it. And I can't remember what the figure was, because the figure was so irrelevant. Like, it didn't really mean anything, but it was enough to declare a mistrial. Not that the trial had been particularly good up until that point either. Like, I think it'd been a shit show that probably should never have gone ahead. Yeah, so that was the background on that. Yep. So Ozpol's latest YouGov, Fon on 25, Libs on 14, LMP 4. You know that. Oh, you mean that can't be right? What do you mean LMP 4? I'm going to look this up. I want to know what the polls are saying. You don't see much of the Channel 6 kids anymore. They used to be fixtures. But maybe they're on school holidays. News poll. 2 L's. It is fucking hot here, by the way. It is brutal. In Tasmania, it was 39 all day today. So, Ozpol 6. Let's have a look. ALP 31, One Nation 25, Libs 14, Green 12. That is an odd thing to do. LMP 4%, Nats 2%, Independent 6, others 6. That's chaos. That's pretty chaotic. That's good. I wonder when it was taken. It's great. That's very great. Well, I do have air conditioning, Steely Dan Enjoyer, but not in the room where I stream from, which was a stupid decision to make. But in my defense, since I've been in Tasmania since May of last year, this is the hottest day of that entire period. Tony Burke says, Tony Burke's on here. Caliburn says, did Tony Burke's anti-hate death squad get Brian? You know what? I haven't even checked. I didn't even look at the time. I just been spewing nonsense. And I had... okay, he said at 8:31, she's almost asleep. Be on soon. I have no idea how kids work. I have no idea. Oh, why can't you just, could someone with kids in the chat, my friend Ben's in the chat, I know he's got a kid. Why can't you just let them stay up, then have them like go to sleep when they're tired? Like, it's not like the kid's got to go to work tomorrow. Like, why does the kid have to like go to sleep at a specific time? That's not a bit. That's a serious question. I have no idea why that is. But all my friends with kids are like, oh, it's so hard putting the kid down to bed. Why? I mean, they got to sleep eventually. Like, are they so dumb that the kid will just keep staying up? Will they be like one of those like Russian sleep deprivation experiments? I think Brian works from home, dude. Like, I don't know. Did you see the kid was on last week? He's a little kid. I'd just let mine stay up if I had one. No one's going to be that stupid, but yeah, I don't know much about kids or women or anything. Anyway, those news poll results are really good. We should be excited about those. Yeah. Enoch says, you'd think if they stay up, they'd fall asleep, but they don't they get worse. That seems like a critical design flaw. Stealing Dan Enjoyers gives them a bit of whiskey. My dad claims he used to do that to me, and he called it a Scotch boppy, but he could have been making that up, and I don't know. Like, yeah. So they get cranky if they stay up. But I guess I get cranky if I stay up, but you kind of like roll through it. You get out the other side of it. Also, if they're awake when someone needs to look after them. Really? When they're just at home? Like, what can they possibly do? Like, what do you guys' homes look like? You're like fucking like kitchen knives lying on the floor? Like, surely it's like I have a room the kid can just potter around in. I know nothing about kids. I heard from a Liberal person today that Hastie is fucking up his pitch to the party by saying he isn't really pro-life. Well, that would kind of fuck up your pitch, wouldn't it? I mean, unless... I heard today that he's got 20 votes. And he needs another 6, which is such a joke. Like, that's how few members they have. But maybe, maybe he's just trying to pinch over a couple of the moderate caucus. Zinger says, welcome in, Zinger. Haven't seen you tonight. Coalition will definitely return. No chance Cadell and McKenzie retain their Senate seats without the Liberal brand. At this rate, they might not win second on the ticket at all, though. Well, that's exactly right. McKenzie, I don't know so much about. I actually know Ross pretty well. And, yeah, I mean, he's a machine man, right? Like, Ross isn't out there, you know, working the farms and things like that for votes. Ross lives in Newcastle. So, yeah, I think they're going to need some kind of apparatus to get them back in. I mean, do you know what I just really encourage all these guys to do? Is just go get a fucking job. I know it sounds rich coming from me, but when I say get a job, like a lot of you will probably just go out and be consultants as well and compete with me and find out it's hard and they're not getting any clients. But why are you there at this point? You know, I was seeing this thing about Hastie and Angus yesterday when they started ratcheting up like the leadership stoushes. I said, it's happening, the spill's happening. And I looked at these two guys who, like, putting politics aside, they're both really impressive guys. They're interesting guys. They're smart guys. And you look at them and you think, in this political moment we're living in, what do you really have to offer Australia? And the answer is nothing, really. Like what? Like, you got okay speeches, you look okay, and the press gallery likes you. Well, that might have worked in the late 1990s. It's not going to work today. The kind of epoch we're entering. But I'm sure they're good people. Why not just go get another job? You know, when Trump came up, look at what happened in 2016 when Trump came in. And look at what happened to so many establishment Republicans who were sitting there like aghast that this was happening. Like, oh no, the dignity of the office, oh, the great old party. Oh. And then Trump came in, like, bull in a china shop, smashes the place up, changes the entire character of American conservative politics forever. All those establishment Republicans from that period, they went out and they got jobs. And now some of them have even come back, right? Little Marco Rubio's back. You know, he just went into the wilderness for 4 years, right? After he ran and lost against Trump in the primary, he just disappeared for 4 years. He was a never Trumper too. J.D. Vance was a never Trumper. He wrote a book in that period. Like, they went away, they adapted, they came back. You know, it seems like that's the problem with Australian politics, is we don't have anywhere for these guys to go. You know, so when something like the surge in support for One Nation happens, when something like, you know, this kind of generational shift in the underlying ideology of everyone to the right of center in our country, these legacy politicians have no kind of holding pattern to go into. Like, they have to be there. Their lives will end if they're not there, you know. And the sad thing is it is kind of right in a way. Like, I've known so many of these guys who quit, who just they struggle to make anything of themselves, right? Unless they retire, they're near it, because especially with how the pensions work now. So unless they're already near retirement age, they have nothing. Like, they can't get jobs. Like, they might float around on boards and stuff. I was having this conversation with someone a few weeks ago, and I mocked him for it on the stream before we broke up before Christmas. That apparently Scott Morrison's got like no clients. Scott Morrison's like buzzing back and forth to Washington, just bleeding money because he's not actually working for anyone. Haven't you noticed that? Wouldn't you think if Scott Morrison had a shit hot client, fucking 9 Fairfax at the ABC and Guardian, he'd be wanking all over that. Like, it'd be on every newsstand in the country, like, Scott Morrison working for Lockheed Martin. Like, no, you haven't seen that story because he doesn't have anyone. No one will fucking hire him. And it's the same with all these fucking guys, right? And the core thing is because they're not used to having to do this stuff on their own. It's super hard work. First year after I quit politics was the hardest of my fucking life. Like, it really was. Like, I thought I was just going to be fucking easy street. Like, I was going to be drowning in money and pussy and cocaine. No. Okay. 2 of those things were true. But it was so goddamn hard. Because you ring the clients, you get the clients, you finally sign the client, and you got to retain the client. That's why they call it a retainer. They don't call it free monthly money. They call it a retainer because you have to retain them by calling them every single day and writing shit for them and working for them and doing briefs and sniffing up intelligence and getting meetings. And like, that's what the job is. It's really fucking annoying. It's not hard. Like, it's not like I'm breaking rocks with a pickaxe, right? But it's annoying, and you got to like get up every day and devote a significant amount of your time to it daily. And you look at these guys, the politicians who go out and become consultants. They're not like that. They haven't been doing that. They don't work hard. Right? You got a job with like family-friendly sitting hours where a staffer like helps you pick the kids up from school and shit, and then you got to go out and catch what you know, kill what you catch yourself. It's really hard for them, and they all struggle with it. That's why I can only think of like one lobby shop in the country that is actually run by a former politician, and it's run by a long gone Labor MP from Victoria, who has been a senior and well-respected government relations professional longer than he ever was a member of parliament now. But everywhere else, these guys, they get hired, like the most senior ones might get hired as like the chair or something, like a made-up position. Like Michael Photius had Graham Richardson working for him. I mean, everyone knew all Graham did was walk around with his fucking oxygen tank and go to lunch, but he was there to shake people's hands and have like one good idea every now and then. But no one is in there doing any work, and you know, so that's why they want to stay. They all know this in their heart of hearts. Like, they can't say it. They can't say, "Hey, I don't want to have to leave Parliament because I'm fucking unemployable," but they know it. So, yeah. what do we? Ben says Pine does well for himself. Yeah, but that's a different business. Like Pine is also not running it. Like Pine went out with, he actually went out with a bunch of people. So Pine is kind of a different scenario. Pine started a company with staff. That's not what a lot of those guys do. Check how many guys in the register hockey has. Any thoughts on? I got to scroll up. Any thoughts on the large amount of non-FON right-wing parties running in the SA election? Libertarians, Fair Go, United Voice, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, and hopefully FON can bury them all. My intel out of South Australia is that FON is burying them all, except for Sarah Games, whatever it's called. I think she might be Fair Go. She's a bit of a risk because she's X1 Nation. But she's really just chewing into them in the upper house. Look, I'm not generally that worried about. I mean, United Australia Party are just lame ducks. The Libertarians have their discrete Libertarian voter base, and so you're not going to see the Libertarians disappear, but you're going to see the Libertarians contract all the way back to like what is the natural Libertarian vote in Australia, which is 2%. Right, it's not much. Like, there's not that many actual Libertarians in Australia. I mean, I'm not even a Libertarian. So that's what you see, and that's fine for One Nation, because what you were seeing before in the slightly elevated Libertarian vote, because they were getting up to 4% in some places before everyone just snapped to One Nation. And it was probably the same people who are now going to One Nation, who were just looking for the viable alternative. Tommy Down Under says, I'm SA and Labor will kill it. They just chilled in SAG with Flo. They pay no attention to politics. Really, dude, the reason why SA Labor does so well, and like putting aside Malasakis' like Keir Starmer stuff that he does, which the whole Labor International is doing, it's because they're quite conservative, because SA Labor has a reputation for being conservative. And you don't get the fucking dumbest shit over there. You get a little bit of it, because like all Labor parties, they've got a bunch of left-wingers. Ben says, did you see that story about how the Australian Democrats are trying to stage a comeback? No, but that's funny. Aren't they just the Teals, but poor? Like, why would they? What's their electorate going to be? Libertarian putting convicted fraudsters at Stop Boy Scout Jamboree money is a bold electoral strategy. I don't know, man. I'm increasingly of the view that it doesn't even matter who you run at this point. Like, the only successful libertarians are in Argentina. But that's a kind of an interesting case. That's like that's the libertarian edge case. Like, that's how bad things need to get. You need to get to Argentina's point before it even starts making sense. Libertarians are like unicorns in Australia or femboys in the Northern Territory. I don't. That's something interesting. I've never been to Darwin. There you go. Never been there. Been to Tennant Creek once, but I've never been to Darwin. So I don't know. I imagine it's. I lived in Townsville for a bit. I imagine it's kind of like that, but I'm going to go back to the show notes that Enoch kindly put together. See if I've missed anything. No, not much. We don't have much going on. Yeah. So we're going to take some more questions from the chat, and then we'll bail with Brian having been taken from us. But what I might do is, if I do bail, I'll put the I'll be on until 10:30, but I'll put the like stream intro back up, and maybe Brian will jump on with guys later. Enoch Bowden says, thoughts on MFA sputtering out? I mean, I don't know the extent to which it's sputtering out. I've heard a lot of stories. Sputtering yes and sputtering no. Look, I was kind of unkind to some of those guys over the last few months, which wasn't meant to be mean, but it's more just my intellectual vanity more than anything. And if there's one piece of self-growth I've probably done in the last few months, it's that probably the challenges facing our country are probably more important than my profound intellectual vanity, and that means I have to be more tolerant of people who speak and sound differently than me. I know our movement is not known for tolerance of people who are different, but I'm going to try. And so that was probably the basis for a lot of it. Probably wasn't so much anything they actually did, so long as just how they said they were going to do it. But I really think they did an amazing job, and under very trying circumstances. I didn't even realize just the actual work, the work that goes on behind the scenes on those things. Like I saw the guys in Tasmania, like the fucking paperwork, like the sleepless nights, the visits from cops. Like those guys made a lot of sacrifices to make that happen. And I think I've been sitting there for ages saying, yeah, it should have stayed anonymous. It should have, like, let it happen, been kind of lackadaisical with it. No, I don't think that was ever going to work. So I don't think they are sputtering out. I think the numbers are going to contract because the anger that's out there is being replaced with hope. And hope doesn't get people to go to marches. Hope gets people to stay at home and vote, which is more important long term. So look, I think to an extent they should in some form or another continue happening. I'd like to see them kind of a bit more casual. I really enjoyed the one we just had in Tassie because we had this is like a barbecue with a bunch of guys standing around. I had heaps of kids there and balloons and fucking. I think we had a face painting thing. People kept their speeches nice and tight, and I don't think we really ended up having an open mic either. So, or we might have, but I left. So, I'd like to see more kind of community events or something. Just get a bunch of folks together, stand on a soapbox, do some speeches, and go home, rather than the kind of marching and banging drums and stuff, which I think is I think it attracts maybe a type of people who aren't politically helpful. That's just my view. So yeah, I think they were really good though. Who else we got? Ben says it's gonna be 42 in the ACT tomorrow. You guys are gonna die, man. The ACT doesn't handle that stuff well. Thankfully, I still got cold beer. Australians are basically apathetic. Yeah, well, I don't think it's apathy. It's kind of like this she'll be right mentality that we have, which, for much of Australian history was actually fairly accurate. I mean, it would more or less be right. Unfortunately, that only gets you so far nowadays. I think that's what people are kind of realizing, is that the days of just wait and see and waiting it out, they're not going to work. Head in Sandism, Taranango says, yeah, well, people are certainly waking up now, aren't they? Right? Toxic she'll be right, isn't it? Yeah. But yeah, I think that's gone. I really do. And I think it's fascinating. It was really fascinating to me, the difference between the people I saw at the August March for Australia to now. And when I speak to you guys on the mainland, everyone's kind of repeating the same message. And it even came out in a lot of like the bullshit news stories where they've vox pop people and stuff. There was so many, and I wouldn't go so far as to call them normies, but a lot more women, shit ton more women this time than last time, and a lot more people who are willing to bring their kids, which is very interesting because it means that they've made the kind of prejudgment that the event is safe and that these are the kinds of people you want your kids around. And it's something I'm noticing like every single day just around Tassie, particularly when you talk to boomers. It's not like they're not like waking up, they're not getting radicalized, they're not getting red pilled, but it's the noticing that's going on, like waves of noticing. And there's this boomer noticing face I've noticed. Like they won't say it. Like my mom, she's one of like the most lovely people who's ever lived. Like there's not a bigoted or prejudiced bone in her body. But guys, like a week ago, we were in town together, and we were at the shoe store, and Mum discovered that when you go to buy shoes in a shoe store, they don't let you hold the box, right? So they give you like one shoe to try on, and then the poor girl in the shoe store, she's like got to hold the box. And that, she's talking to like 10 people. She's got to run in and out with these boxes. The whole system's fucked. And the whole reason they got to do it is because come in, just say, can I try on a pair of shoes? And they just run out with the box and they sell them on eBay or whatever. So they've had to change this entire system. That if like my mom's like 67 years old. So you're a 67-year-old lady who's been buying shoes her entire life. And then you wake up one day and the way you buy shoes has changed. You notice. You wake up one day and you notice. And it was today. Mum came home because I pointed that out to her like afterwards. I said, well, Mum, why do you think that is? Like she pointed that out. And I pointed that out to her. But then today she comes home from Big W and told me straight away that they've changed how you buy cans of deodorant in the store. So you've got to go to like this special box and get them out. And all the ones that are on the shelf are empty. And she asked because Mum realized she'd taken home an empty can of deodorant. And so she was pissed and she took it back. And so they explained to her that kids had been coming in and they just put empty cans of deodorant on the shelf and they take the full ones and run back out. And so this time, instead of me pointing out to her, she did it organically. And it's sad because these people, they feel bad about noticing, like, right? She's like a lovely person. My mum worked in refugee camps and shit. She was a nurse her whole life. She voted left her entire life. And now she's noticing. And so if you think about that little anecdote and this flow it all the way through our entire society, like if that's the point at which an individual is starting to notice, I mean, imagine where else it's happening. Imagine the people who are already on the borderline, who are waking up going, yeah, it's crazy, man. It is crazy. Someone just put a question in about how young my mum is. Yeah, like that was a thing that used to happen. Especially because we're from Tasmania. Like, that started young down here. Rob Hags says, yeah, who's stealing the deodorant? I was hoping someone would get that joke. Yeah. Maybe that is a good thing for them to steal. Yeah. Swing State says, women are the issue. So many are far left. They need to be brought to the center. It's not necessarily true. Well, you're right in that like women are often the issue. But it's a certain type of woman, right? Because the issue is that there are women who have managed to completely silo themselves off from this stuff, and they don't need to see it anymore. And there've been various changes in the way how women live. That means they don't need to encounter any of this stuff. I mean, you want to think about the weird little technological quirks that I think have built up to having like allowing this to happen. Like I think one of them is online dating, right? Because if you didn't have Tinder, if you didn't have Hinge, if you didn't have Bleep Bloop or whatever the fuck else they got, and you were still going to nightclubs to pick up members of the opposite sex, I really don't think we would have got ourselves into this immigration mess, because everyone would have noticed way earlier. Like if you started going to a nightclub, back in, I'm trying to think last time I had to do it, it would have been like maybe 2008, 2007, 2008. And then you would notice, and you'd have these guys coming up to you. Like women would have formed SS cadres overnight, but technology's kind of caught up. It's fascinating how like Japan, and like Japan's probably the most interesting geopolitics story of the week. We might get to that. How quickly Japan turned on the whole immigration thing. And it's because one of the most fascinating things about Japan is, despite their reputation, they are quite kind of technologically backwards country. They don't like, unlike the rest of us, they haven't really adopted a lot of the pointless technology. Like the Japanese are very much obsessed with like, well, if something works really well and provides a social function, why change it? Why erode it? I read somewhere that like Japan has traditionally had one of the lowest take-ups of rideshare, because like Japanese cabs are so good, right? one of the lowest rates of Uber Eats deliveries, because Japan has designed its cities where really good food is only ever like walking distance away. So when they have even just a little bit of immigration, and because of course they're like pandas, they never fuck. It's not like these people are breeding. So the Golden Nightclubs thing, they didn't notice it. So when they just have a little bit of immigration, because they are living their lives less exclusively online, because they live in smaller houses, they're going out more, they noticed it straight away. Whereas in the Australian condition, we have nice big houses, we have a phone, we have our TV, we have fucking Uber Eats, whatever. It took us longer to notice. The other interesting thing, of course, is that, I mean, Australia had the whole COVID thing. A lot of the Western world had the COVID thing. And we had our immigration growing in advance of that and immediately afterwards. So we had this like moment where we didn't really notice. But Japan had a really great COVID. They had one of the world's best kind of COVID experiences. So like they didn't have that where it could kind of sneak up on them, where they're all locked inside. They just did these like short, sharp little lockdowns every now and then. So they didn't have like this long period where this was bubbling away, and then it's like, you know, the jump scare of your country's got like 1 million more Indians and Chinese in it. Like the Japanese are paying close attention to that stuff. They've called their election for February the 8th. Snap election, unusually good bit of political brinkmanship from the Japanese. And they're out in the hustings right now. It's fascinating. Reading about it's absolutely fascinating. I don't know. If Brian doesn't get here soon, I'm going to go on a 20-minute rant about Japanese economics, I think. So, and I might have to do it in my Werner Herzog voice. Which, just on that, I thought that was one of the most interesting things that happened this week was the mountain thing. Like, you know, just creating a whole like social moment out of the Homeland Security Twitter account is just absolutely genius. And just the fact that it was Werner Herzog as well. The penguin does not go back to the colony. He goes to the mountain. Thoughts on precious metals ripping Japan carry trade. Is that about the thing with the Japanese metals market? I think I did read about that. Nizo says, you know, Japan has fixed its economy when they start saying no to American tourists. I mean, this really is like at the core of the Japanese problem. Well, I don't want to make this all about Japan. The reflection on Australia and Australia's unique position is when you read a lot about the Japanese economy, what you realize is that the crisis, the immigration crisis, they have now headed off, but the underlying cause of it is actually how much more like our economy the Japanese economy was getting, and what the difference was before. Japan had this real like two-speed economic system. It's fascinating to look at Japanese GDP per capita, because it's like 2/3 lower than ours. Japan has this low, spiky per capita GDP, whereas ours is quite high. One of the reasons for that is because Japan has, and I think I tweeted this the other day, like this kind of Japanese cultural trait where they don't need a lot of like consumer competition for things, and the Japanese will just kind of naturally decide, well, we only have one brand of curry, you know, like we like this one brand of things, and everyone will just by consensus kind of adopt it. This comes out in their business practices, where at every level of big business, the Japanese will kind of get to this point and say, well, I mean, how many car manufacturers do we need? 3? Yeah, 3. And so over time, like, things will coalesce together, and they have one heavy manufacturing company, they have one major media company, and these companies absorb things over time, and they become extremely big. There was a thing Trump was joking about it the other day, like Toyota, the head of Toyota, was in, and the owner was in America, and he said, like, how much do you own the Toyota company? He said, 92%, right? Now, he could at any point own all of Toyota. They could take it private, but he doesn't, right? It's not the Japanese way. You have all these zaibatsus, these mega corporations, which are leveraged with shares to their actual employees with very small parts of them actually being traded. And their stock market's the Nikkei is largely stabilized as a result of it. Starting about 10 years ago, but leading up to it, in the wake of the Asian financial crisis, you get a lot of like predatory stock market behavior by the West on the Nikkei. We have that like debt to equity swap thing. They started doing those currency swaps, which became an issue a couple of years ago. And so there started to become this hunger for things to invest in Japan, which they didn't traditionally have. Japan kind of had huge companies, small businesses, and the scale of medium-sized enterprises in the middle was comparatively quite small. An interesting thing that Japanese companies do is when they have an underperforming business unit, they don't sell it, they just cast it off, right? I mean, Lexus starts out as a Toyota underperforming business unit. Do you remember, like, back before all computers looked the same, there used to be the Sony Vaio, right? Sony used to make not desktops, but like laptop computers. They've sold really badly. So Sony didn't sell the Vaio brand. They just cut the Vaio brand off. And you can now in Japan buy a Vaio, right? Sony Ericssons, which are not available in the West, you can buy those. Oftentimes, the failure in a lot of these businesses was they were failing to find a mass market outside Japan, and outside of the company, they would then become these medium-sized enterprises that would be very successful inside Japan. What's happened over the last 10 years is they've all started listing on the Nikkei to raise more capital. And the impact on that has been narrowing not narrowing profitability, but narrowing profit margins as you've got to pay dividends in a lot of sectors where you didn't used to. It's happened in Japanese healthcare, right? It's happened in Japanese insurance with elements of TAL. And this has been going on for a while. And so for the first time, you've got a growing business lobby in Japan putting pressure on the government on wages. Wages which have always been around kind of sacrosanct in Japan. There's now this enormous pressure to do something about wages because these guys at the big end of town, right? Do you know that Sony has a 500-year plan? Pay rises at Sony are priced in for 500 years. All their companies do this thing. It's like a Japanese trait, you know? They have these like stupidly long longitudinal plans. But if you're like a new kind of medium-sized enterprise listed on the Nikkei, struggling on like maybe a 6% margin or something, you don't have that. And you're sitting there going, well, what can we control? Wages. How do we get wages down? We pay people less. How do you pay people less in a country which has said, you know, I think some of these big companies, they have guys who turn 60 and if they have a couple of extra years before retirement, they give them a desk and a pillow. Like that's just their way, right? So how do you change all that? Change the culture, change immigration. And so this new emerging business lobby in Japan has become hugely influential over the last 10 years. And it's because of this economic problem that they've allowed that to happen. Japan's old economic system, it wasn't great if you were an external investor, but it was great if you were a salary man. Right? If all you wanted to do was go to work 10 hours, put your tie around your head, your banzai, drink 40 beers, marry the secretary, have 3 kids, like read pornographic manga on the plane, on the train, right? You could do all that and you could then retire comfortably and die, you know. But it's a terrible place to invest. And now this has kind of become the problem that they're trying to unpack. So the immigration is downstream from economics. The lesson for Australia, when you look at these shifts and how similar they are to how our economy already works, and you realize the crisis in Australian immigration is just downstream from the economics. And, you know, unfortunately, if someone like me like thinks about this a lot, unfortunately, you can't really see a way for us to fix the economics. It is thermodynamically superior to just fix the immigration. But for the Japanese, they're in a more privileged position. And I think the LDP over there probably has an opportunity to actually fix the underlying economic problem, which is kind of annoying a lot of like right-wingers online in Japan because Sane and Anoda in particular are being really kind of cagey on the immigration thing. They don't want to kind of back themselves into a scenario where they're passing like super restrictive laws because I think their plan is actually to do those economic reforms and say, yeah, we got to have more control over, how a lot of like public equity gets used and a lot of like stock market manipulation that goes on. So that's my rant on Japanese politics. Sorry, I didn't do it in my Werner Herzog voice. Walkmans are iconic, but don't get me wrong, PlayStation's been around for only 30 years now. That's a great example of kind of Japanese electronics, right? Like the Japanese just decided they only need one gaming console. Like the Xbox was out there, it was never 50-50. The Japanese was like, nah, I'm not playing that. And there's great games on Xbox. I think there's like one From Software, the game that was an Xbox exclusive. But Wild Colonial Girl, welcome. The immigration policy is being implemented to cover the deaths and injuries from COVID as well as replace us. Well, I think it probably did start a bit earlier than COVID, just quietly. But yeah, I mean, the replacement of the workforce is goes without saying. But yeah, I'm not so sure about the COVID deaths. Senex Australia says Japan's demographics and lost decades prove aging demographics without immigration don't lead to economic collapse. That's exactly right. They don't. They do lead to economic homeostasis, though. And, I mean, they also lead to slow kind of contractions at scale, which I was arguing with some fucking brainlets about the other day in a thread where I'd kind of, they talked because, you know, guys like, particularly guys in our side of politics, like super into the birth rates and everything. And they believe that, like, you know, we're all going to die out if we don't hit 1-1 or whatever, which is horseshit. What it does, though, if you're not going to take steps to address it, if you're going to sit at these like suboptimal birth rates, is you have to contract at scale. And so much of the tension comes about because you have an economy designed at one growth rate. And when you don't reach it, people start losing money because the whole market is speculating on its size downstream. It's exactly what all stock markets are. You're taking a bet on how big the economy is going to be in 12 months. And if you don't adapt your economy and by extension your society to the fact that with low birth rates, you're going to shrink and manage the shrinkage, you're going to get into a lot of trouble. Now, the Japanese are doing that. I mean, what's been incredible watching the last couple of days of coverage of the election speeches. Do you know the buzzword that you will never in your whole life see a politician do this, except for Japan right now, is they're standing in front of cameras and they're talking about automation. They're talking about fucking robots, right? They're saying, like, well, if our birth rate's not going to go up, I mean, they're encouraging people to have kids, but if the birth rate doesn't go up, and we don't want to bring in then they're going to replace you with robots. It's fucking cool, I reckon. And Japan's already leading the way in a lot of robotics. So, you know, this is what ends up having to happen if you don't solve the birth rate problem. The other thing that shits me about people who complain about the birth rates is that people are living longer. This is so much of the issue. Societies have to get better at how they manage the length of time people are living and what they do in it, right? I mean, how they design, like, centrally plan a person's life, if you will. I mean, I think one thing that we should really look at doing is like some kind of like midlife educational regime subsidy where you kind of give people in their mid to late 50s an opportunity to retrain, like, you know, through maybe like using some kind of superannuation regime where you say, okay, so you're born, you go to school, you learn all the basic shit, you go away to school for like another 4 or 5 years, you specialize, then you go do something for 20, 30 years, but you might decide to change, or you might not like it, or you might just want to do something different. That malaise that kicks in, I think, is the trigger for so much of the low productivity in our society. So if you said to those people, hey, here's the thing, the government's going to help you go back to school and design the education system around that, because the education system is designed for fucking dirtbag idiot 21-year-olds, right? The university is designed to teach a 21-year-old moron how to be a scientist. They're not designed how to teach a 55-year-old how to be a scientist. So recalibrate the education system towards, so that there's an element of it designed for the retraining of people in their middle age, because chances are, especially with like a lot of modern jobs, a lot of modern technical digital jobs, you're gonna be able to do them from home, right? We could then kind of create a culture in a society where people say, hey, I want to work with my hands. I want to be a tradie. I want to do construction. I want to be a cop. I want to do fucking work at the circus or whatever, right? And you do that in your 20s, 30s, 40s, where your body can do it. And then you can go back to school and you can do a brain job for the rest of it. Because in a society where you're probably going to live to 80 or whatever. So if you kind of like calibrate your society like that, I think we're all going to be a lot happier. But those kind of good ideas, no one ever actually does those. John, serious question. Do we need an intervention with our US cousins? They aren't the same as they used to be. No, not really. I mean, they are what they are. Look, Trump is creating a new American hegemony. Is that how you say it? I never actually have to say that out loud. Is it hegemony or hegemony? Hegemony sounds more fun to say, but I'm not going to Google how that's pronounced. I'm just not going to say it again. An American empire, if you will. And look, we had one before. We just didn't call it that. It was moderately successful. Then it went to the sandpit, and it wasn't. Ben says, say ennui now. Yeah, ennui. I once got caught by a woman, actually. And by the way, the worst part was she was a beautiful woman that I was in love with. And she was super smart. And I was trying to sound super smart. And I said, NUI. And like for years, she would not let me live it down. Would not let me live it down. So now I know how to pronounce ennui. What was I saying before Ben distracted me with my pathos about lost loves? America. Yeah, he's just creating a new American empire. That's it. He wants Greenland. Fucking let him have it. Well, let him take it. Like, Europe's fucked. No one cares about Europe. Fuck him. Europe couldn't even control their borders from fucking Algerians. Like, Europe's a dead project. The European Union and NATO are the liberal parties of the Northern Hemisphere. Yeah. Someone said retreating from Minneapolis is the first sign of trouble. Sad. Has he? Is that what's happened? I haven't been paying attention. I try not to pay too much attention. Yeah. Yeah. Late Republican transition to empire. Let's go. Hopefully. We need one. We're just going to check up on Brian, see where he is. No, nothing. No word from Brian. He may have been Rothschilded. Uh-oh. And someone from... I hate it when I check my Twitter feed and I look at my notifications and I've got a person at Blue Sky followed me. And the bio says, Labor and Geelong supporter by heritage and values. Well, why are you following me? It's a woman. Man, this is what happens when I appear in the newspaper. I should just block. Actually, I could probably just go right. Get Claude to do a little widget that just goes through my follow list and blocks everyone with a Blue Sky surname, couldn't I? Yeah. Yeah, I could do that. It could be fun. Check that online. Did you see someone invented the app that just goes through live streams on Twitch and then gets coordinates and automatically messages ICE? I thought that was pretty funny. Breadmaker says DM her, ask her for pics. I know. I'm not going to do that. I'm nice to women as a general rule. Swing state. Well, why is Minneapolis so far left? I have no idea. I don't know a lot about like the individual state kind of political problems in America. So if anyone knows, like, I know like the background of some of them. Like, you know, some of the, because like you have like the white flight out of California and they went down to Arizona and they become all lefty, and you know, a nominally Republican place like Arizona gets like that. I imagine that's happening everywhere. The only issue I have with Trump is he's kind of benefiting the European left. I mean, one of the big issues is with the European left is they're fucking lazy, right? And there's also like this, they're kind of like there's two elements of them that are like joined at the hip, I think is what I read the other day, that you've got they're kind of like quasi-liberalist kind of stream, downstream of Macron, post-Blairite nonsense. And then you've got like the brick-chucking Marxists, like, those kinds of people. And, what Trump is of benefit to is the Macrons of the world. The Marxist left always can be like that. I don't think they're that popular anymore either. Right? I don't think kids really want to be involved in that kind of stuff. I mean, kids don't really want to be involved in shit anyway. I think, they might end up cosplaying as it online, but I don't think they're going to kind of subsume it into their entire political identity. A lot of the southern states are right-wing because they're living around African Americans. I mean, I don't know, man. I'm probably like, if you were to catalog like all the people I'm racist about, probably least racist to African Americans. There are African Americans are as much of a victim of the culture wars as we are in a lot of ways, because they had, over the course of 100 years, had like experienced this unique cultural renaissance that like no other culture in the history of the world had ever had. They come out of bondage in the 19th century, set to work trying to achieve equality, and somewhere along the way they kind of developed their own kind of this very unique cultural trait about it, where by the time the civil rights movement comes around in the 1960s, by the time Martin Luther King's there, because they are in a way kind of cut off from the central organ of like leftist agitation, the universities, they don't absorb a lot of those kind of Marxist values, because they have this kind of religiosity, particularly in the southern states. The cultural trait that emerges, and it's this idea that you used to see in a lot of like leftist agitprop in the 80s and 90s, this idea of like black excellence, right? That's what they wanted. They didn't just want equality, they wanted black excellence. It's good when Michael Jordan is the richest basketballer in the country. That's black excellence. Like in Sidney Poitier's black excellence. Like, Colin Powell is black excellence. So you have this idea. It's internalized by all black Americans, more or less. Like if you drive around the US South, which I did years ago with a friend, like every zip code has some elderly black guy running a stall that's America's best barbecue. Like, so you talk to fucking American janitors, I tell you they're the best janitor. Guys that spritz fucking cologne on you in nightclub toilets tell you they're the best at that. That was kind of African American culture throughout a big part of their history. But then that reason why that emerged, that being closed out of the kind of like Marxist brainwashing institutions, they fixed that. They fixed it with affirmative action. And when they go into those places, the message that's being given to them by every influential person in African American history, which is you achieve equality not by fighting for equality. You achieve equality by just being really good at things and proving that we're as good as white people. That all gets wiped out. And it only takes one generation before that attitude of, the path to equality is going to be, proving that we can do everything as good as they can, to it being, well, why should we have to prove it? Fuck you. You colonized us. We were slaves. Like ideas that had not really had much cachet in African American culture up until that point, suddenly become du jour. And that's what poisons them so badly. The idea that the path to equality is just sitting around doing nothing and you're entitled to do that because we were mean, right? And that's not their fault, right? Any more than the dumbest things that leftoids believe is not their fault. Like, I mean, this stuff is incredibly persuasive. The powers that be wouldn't devote so much time to shoving it down everyone's throat if it wasn't. It's well designed. Marxism is one of the most mimetic ideas of the 20th century, increasingly the 21st century. So I have a lot of empathy for African Americans for that reason. And because they're really kind of the first victims of woke in a lot of ways, and they've never really recovered from it as a result. They were so close to getting somewhere. Now it's been set back generations. I don't think they've been set back like a generation to before the conditions they were in, before the civil rights movement started. So to even get to like where they were kind of like culturally accepted in the 90s and to a lesser extent the early 2000s, certainly in the early 2000s, is going to take like a complete redo of the last 50 years of history. And the stuff people say about African Americans online now, the things that have kind of like seeped into like white mainstream consciousness about them. God, you would never in a million years not just thought that, but like ever believed any of that stuff back when I was a kid in the 80s and 90s. Like that just never would have happened, right? And I've had a lot of white Americans my age reflect on this to me, and they said it feels weird because they said this isn't like what we grew up with. They say like no one 20 years ago is walking around like noticing this stuff. It's like recent. It's a recent phenomenon. It's like a generation. It's like a generational shift. So yeah, that's why I'm pretty sympathetic to him. Plus the music's good. Americans should have shot Fauci and the likes, and it wouldn't have got off the ground. John. No, I don't think we should have shot Fauci. John Doe, this is a really good question. John Doe says, what are some left-wing ideas that have gotten into the right that tick you off? Equality would be one in my book. Well, look, I think it's kind of beyond just being a left-wing idea. I mean, I've been on the record a bunch of times talking about how much I hate like the kind of Australian concepts around egalitarianism and things like that. And I wrote extensively on the Bunyan aristocracy and things. But it's not so much like a left-wing idea, but one thing I've really noticed, particularly interacting with a lot of you in the last 6-7 months, is this kind of, there is like this kind of very third worldist articulation that has crept into the right. The way things get debated on our side, I worry, is becoming increasingly like the way they debate things. And like a lot of that, there's two major reasons for that. One is there used to be a massive class divide between us, between the left and the right. Our people generally had a higher station in life than theirs did. And so the debates could always be kind of predicated on that. Oh, well, I'm off to my club. Bye. But now they're not, because one of the reasons so many people have come around to the ideas is because cost of living, because life has been hard to people, because there is effectively no middle class anymore. The middle class were always kind of inherently centrist. So you take the middle class away, people are going to kind of bifurcate. And as a result, I think we have seen this kind of like third worldism creep into the discourse, like the way we talk about our opponents. And, like when people talk, even just the whole stuff about hate speech, right? I mean, part of the problem is that there is a lot of hate. Like a lot of people on our side of politics do have a lot of hate in their heart. I'll level with you. I mean, hating people is kind of a working class, poor people trait. Like wealthy people don't hate people, right? Successful people don't hate anyone, and there's little elements like that creep in that make me think we have a lot of work to do. We got to make people better. Yeah, because I don't like doing a lot of stuff. I don't like using slurs and things like that. I use the funny slurs, but I don't use the less funny ones. They got rid of all the first home buyer subsidies, reduced immigration, restricted lending, moving tax incentives and landlords. Yeah. Springside says the left is better at the political game than the right. Well, only insofar as where they have designed it, right? And this is where Trump has kind of beat them back, is because he's just kind of changed the rules of the game. He doesn't just like change the rules; he's just changed the game. So, Yeah, Breadmaker says maybe the debate platform being 280 characters is responsible for a lot of that. I don't think it's the character limit. I mean, I don't. I think it's just part. I mean, you know, a huge part of the problem. I was thinking about this when I was writing something the other day. Is people like, particularly young men, they just don't have a lot of life experience, and a lot of it's because you haven't had like the opportunity to have a lot of life experience. COVID killed a year. There's just not as much to do anymore. Can't really travel because everything's so expensive. Like the kind of things I did in my early 20s, like no one, I don't know anyone in their early 20s now who does that kind of stuff. You know, and I think that has it's changed the character of debate, because you can see it all the time, like on issues like woman stuff, right? Like the way guys online talk about women, it's gross, and a lot of it's funny. Like I indulge in it, I call them Foids or whatever, but you know, a lot of that is based on the fact that these guys don't see a lot of women, and maybe you see like one at a time if you're like moderately successful at dating. You don't get exposed to a lot of them at once you leave school. And even the way education is now, like you don't see a lot of them. You don't then, you know, you don't kind of like build up a profile of femininity in your head. And that then leads to this kind of like stereotyping and this like kind of making of like rank assumptions about things. I mean, women are incredibly vicissitudinous and not really, you know, they're the kind of like stereotype that we portray online, particularly the right does, is not really accurate. It's funny, don't get me wrong, and then women's reaction to it is funny. That's not true. Like I think a lot of men think it's true because they have no outside experience of it. And one of the things that really annoys me about when the government does all this, you know, like we're going to educate young boys and make sure they respect women. Well, okay, well, introduce them to some, right? Because you can't get men like. I would not respect women if my only experience of women was fat middle-aged school teachers and some lesbian that they brought in to tell me to respect women, and the proto women at my school who aren't fully formed yet. Right? I respect women because I have a mother and I've worked with hundreds of them. Right? I see them every day, and that you meet good ones. There's bad ones, there's good ones. There's incredibly impressive women, there's interesting ones, there's uninteresting ones. So if you have that exposure to them, then you'll respect them, right? Or at least it's how it works with me. I don't know for everyone else. And yet that's not what they do. Like that's really like the key to making young men respect women is just through exposure, right? And if all you're exposing them to is this hectoring and saying, oh, it's really bad if you laugh about women with your friends or whatever. Like, of course it's not going to work. Or like you're a fucking evil monster because you watch Andrew Tate. I mean, no, you're just a moron for watching Andrew Tate. It's not like a values judgment. Which kind of goes back to that point about the, third worldism that has crept into a lot of right-wing discourse. Osnian says the future is incel. Deal with it. That great line, one of my favorite lines from Mike Mars. I think it's Gothic Violence, not Harassment Architecture, where he says the incel and the terminally handsome get along so well because they both have that aerial view of femininity. Someone with an aerial view of femininity, not through handsomeness, but just through incredible charm. I do find that's extremely accurate. He says segregate women. Well, I'm saying the complete opposite. I disagree with that. I'm saying we need less segregation of women. You guys need to see more women. You need to be around them more. You just need to talk to them more, right? Somehow force that to happen. I think that's always go back to like good first principles, like at the kind of the beginning. You wind back to the clock in like 2015. I remember the meme on 4chan was like government mandated girlfriends. So that's a good policy for all you guys. Government mandated girlfriends. Yeah. John Doe says the problem seems that a lot of slurs women jokes attract people who can't understand it as a joke. Yeah, exactly right. Steely Dan Enjoy says blue light discos at gunpoint. That is a fantastic idea. Not the gunpoint. I don't think we need to, like, if blue light discos. You know what? That could be a good kind of jape, post March for Australia. We start doing blue light discos. Call them Orange Light Disco for fun. Guys, it's 10:40. 10:40. I've been on for 2 hours. I think Brian's a no-show. I'm super mad that he left me to carry this on my own because I'm really tired. I hope those of you who stuck with it had a good time. I'm not doing much for the rest of the week. Might have a good Substack out at some point. Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you for listening to me rant on my own for 2 fucking hours. It was fun. All right. Tommy says Brian will be here in just 20 minutes. I'll leave the stream up with the music playing, I think. So if he wants to come on, he can jump on. If Enoch's in here, you know what to do with the stream. I'm just going to jump off. All right, guys, it was fun. Talk to you soon. Stay conscious.